An example of that. Here we have x minus 6 raised to the 2/3 power minus 4 equals 0. First thing I would do is get this exponent, this term raised to the rational power on one side by itself. So I'll get x minus 6 to the 2/3 equals 4. Now I raise both sides to the reciprocal power. So I raise this to 3/2, and that means I raise the 4 to 3/2 also. Now, if you remember your rules about exponents, when you raise an exponent to another power, you just multiply these together. Well, 2/3 times 3/2 is just 1. So I get x minus 6 equals. Now over here, this 4 to the 3/2, I can write it two different ways. I can make it the square root of 4, and that answer cubed, or it can equal 4 cubed, and then the square root of that. So it can do either way. I think I'm going to pick this way right now. So I'm going to have x minus 6 is 4 cubed. It'll be plus or minus the square root of 64. And the square root of 64 is plus or minus 8. So x minus 6 equals plus or minus 8. So x equals 6 plus or minus 8. 6 plus 8 is 14, or 6 minus 8 is -2. And end up with these two answers. You can also have a quadratic inequality, so an x squared term with an inequality to solve. So you write an equivalent inequality with 0 on one side and the function on the other side. Then you solve the function for equals 0. You create a sign diagram, use the solutions from step 2 to divide the number line in intervals, pick a test value in each interval, and determine if it's positive or negative in that interval. So it's positive or negative in that interval to create a sign diagram. And then you identify the intervals that satisfy the inequality we made up here with 0 on one side by itself. We'll try for that. So we've got this. X squared minus 5x plus 4 is greater than or equal to 0. We're going to solve the equation x squared minus 5x plus 4 equals 0. Well, that factors into x minus 4 times x minus 1 equals 0. X equals 4, x equals 1. Now, the sign diagram. We basically draw a number line, and we identify 1 and 4 on that number line. And then we pick values. One value before the first one value between, one value afterwards. So I'm going to pick 0 down here, and I go up here to my inequality with 0 on one side and do 0 minus 5, 0 plus 4. So that's going to be 4, and that's a positive. I pick a number between 1 and 4. Maybe I do 2. 2 squared is 4, minus 5 times 2 is 10, plus 4. It'll be 8 minus 10 is -2. That's a negative. And a value here, I'll do 5. So 25, 5 squared minus 5 times 5 is 25, plus 4. Oh, that's a positive also. So this becomes my sign diagram. What do I want? I want it to be greater than or equal to 0. Well, at 1 and 4, it was 0. Sometimes it's helpful to fill those in. So when is it greater than or equal to 0? This section from -0 to 1, and we want the 0. So that's a bracket, and then it starts being 0 or greater, at 4 to infinity. Now, if you want to just say that with inequality signs, it's x is less than or equal to 1, or x is greater than or equal to 4. That's the other way you can write that answer. This one, first we have to do the rule of getting one side equal to 0. So I'm going to move these two. I will have 6x squared, subtract 4x, will be plus 5x, subtract 6, be negative 2, is less than 0. Now I'm going to solve the inequality. 6x squared plus x minus 2 equals 0. Since this one is a little different, maybe I'll show the grouping. 6 times negative 2, negative 12. So when we multiply to negative 12 and add to positive 1. How about positive 4 and negative 3 would do that. So 6x squared plus 4x minus 3x minus 2 equals 0. I can factor a 2x out of these terms. That'll give me a 3x plus 2. And since I want this to have a 3x, I'm going to take a negative 1 out of the second set of numbers. So be negative 1 times 3x plus 2 equals 0. That'll factor into 2x minus 1 times 3x plus 2 equals 0. So 2x minus 1 equals 0. 2x will equal 1. X equals 1/2. And 3x plus 2 equals 0. So 3x equals negative 2, and x is negative 2/3. Now I have to do my number line. Here's negative 2/3, and here's 1/2. Something smaller than negative 2/3 could be negative 1, and I'm going to be testing these in this with a 0 on one side. So negative 1 squared is 1 times 6 is 6. 6 minus 1 minus 2. Well, that's positive 3, so that's positive. Between negative 2/3 and positive 1/2 is 0. So 0 plus 0 minus 2, that's a negative. And for 1/2, bigger than that, I'm going to try 1. So I'll have 6 plus 1 minus 2, that's a positive. And here I wanted it less than 0. So here's my 0 and 0, and there it's less than 0 between them. So negative 2/3 is less than x is less than 1/2. That's written with inequality. In interval notation, it would be parentheses, negative 2/3, comma, 1/2, parentheses again.